Okay, we're going to talk about Jacksonian democracy, which will be the presidency of Andrew Jackson. We kind of gave you all the other information on him we could. And I can't remember one of the classes we kind of got started with this. I don't remember if it was this one or the other one. But our first subtopic is going to be the spoils system of government. So if you already have the notes, you can kind of put those in place, or you can take them over again, whatever you'd like to do. We didn't get that far. We're going to talk about the spoils system of government. Now, it was kind of interesting because there's a lot of comparisons between Andrew Jackson and Donald Trump right now. We've talked about that before. Because like Trump, Jackson had no carefully developed political program when he assumed the presidency. Okay, Jackson had no carefully developed political program in place when he assumed the presidency. No carefully developed political program. And I think Donald Trump is the same way. Donald Trump, nobody thought he would win. Nobody thought that a non-politician could win the presidency. And so Donald Trump spent a lot of his time winning the presidency, and I don't think he had a very carefully developed political program when he assumed the office. And neither did Andrew Jackson. What happens if you're not very organized politically is you end up going through quite a few different cabinet members. Okay? Now, has Donald Trump gone through quite a few different cabinet members? Are you paying attention to that at all? He really has. He's run through a lot. And Jackson did the same thing, and we'll talk about that later. And that's what happens when you're not really organized for the presidency when you take over. Now, despite his lack of a political program, there were three things that Andrew Jackson believed in. He had three firm convictions, three things he really, really believed in, which are very important to know. And some of this will ring a bell with you. First of all, he believed that the government belonged to all the people that could vote. Not just the entitled, not just the rich, but the government belonged to all people who could vote. That was a firm conviction, something he firmly believed in, is that the government belonged to all people who could vote. Secondly, he believed in a limited federal government and strong state governments. He believed in a limited federal government and strong state governments. In other words, he believed the state should have the power to make their own laws and rules and regulations, and the federal government ought to stay out of it, so to speak. However, the third conviction kind of trumps that one, because Jackson strongly believed in the power of the presidency. So even though he believed in a limited federal government and strong state government, he believed as president he had the power. He could make the final decisions. So he had three firm convictions. He believed the government belonged to all of the people who could vote. He believed in a limited federal government and a strong state government, but he also believed strongly in the power of the presidency. We told you that one of the first things that President Jackson did when he took office, he created what we know today as the spoils system of government. And the spoils system of government is where you replace all your political opponents in office with those that are loyal or those that are supporters. So you basically replace all political opponents in office. Anybody that could do you any damage in office, you replace them, and you put in their place people that are loyal and that are supporters. And the spoils system of government comes with the famous expression, to the victor belong the spoils. I'll guarantee you, when they have the Super Bowl in February, I think it's February 7th or 5th, I can't remember. But anyway, when they give the Lombardi trophy at the end of the game to whoever team wins, the commentator will give them the trophy, and I'll guarantee you they'll say, to the victor belong the spoils. Now the seniors, for some reason that hit them in mind, I think I told you, because on their t-shirts, which you'll develop as a senior, they put on the back, to the seniors belong the spoils. Hashtag rewriting history, because I always got after them about on their tests when they would rewrite history by their answers. So that was theirs, so that kind of struck with them. But to the victor belong the spoils. Now, as I mentioned before, this system really encouraged loyalty, but didn't necessarily benefit the government, because in many instances, the people that were appointed that were loyal to Jackson were not very experienced and not very good politicians. So these people that Jackson brought in as his loyal supporters into his government were loyal, but they had no political experience, and so they really didn't do much for the government. They didn't make decisions on what was in the best interest of the country. They made decisions on what? What they thought Andrew Jackson would think would be the best for the country. And he didn't always make decisions that were best for the country. So they didn't want to offend him, so they didn't use their own mind when making decisions. Okay? These people that were appointed to key positions made decisions that was based on what Jackson thought was best, not necessarily what might have been best for the United States of America. Jackson was very firm in his belief, however, that the spoils system helped the government. He thought there was no question that having loyal people around you, despite their lack of political experience, would be the best thing for the government. Well, when you believe in the power of the presidency, that probably makes sense. It eventually is going to cause Jackson some problems in his administration because he doesn't have good people in there. And I think that, you know, President Trump has faced the same thing. I think he really has. He replaced, if you haven't been keeping up on it, probably is what I considered his best appointment, Secretary of Defense Maddox resigned just before we left for Christmas vacation. And people are shaking their head going, boy, if that guy resigns, what's going on here? You know, because he was pretty highly regarded. Okay, that'll take us to our next subtopic, which is the Battle of the Petticoats. The Battle of the Petticoats. Anybody know what a petticoat is? Nobody? Girls, you don't know what a petticoat is? It's okay if you know, that doesn't mean it.
You just said girls.
No, what is a petticoat? Well, not... No? Anybody know what petticoats are? Do you remember when Paul Revere was the Boston Tea Party, when he was sneaking across during his ride, whatever? Didn't he have to muffle the oars of his rowboat so that the British didn't hear? What did that girl give him? Tore off part of her petticoat. It's an undergarment for women back in the day. Okay, it was an undergarment. It was not like you see today. It was, you know, it was very, it covered you, I would say that. Yeah. So, 1 month into Jackson's presidency, a scandal occurred known in history as the Battle of the Petticoats. Okay? And somebody said that petticoats might mean what? Upper class. Who said that? You're kind of close there, okay, in a way. So 1 month into Jackson's presidency, a scandal occurred that was known in history as the Battle of the Petticoats. Now, it wasn't a scandal maybe like you know today, but this scandal was about Margaret Peggy Eaton. Okay, the center of the scandal was Margaret Peggy Eaton. And she was the wife of President Jackson's Secretary of War, John Eaton. So this scandal that resulted in the Battle of the Petticoats was centered around Margaret Peggy Eaton, who was the wife of Jackson's Secretary of War, John Eaton. I'll give you a little time because you know you haven't taken notes for 15 days. Now, the scandal kind of hit Jackson emotionally because Margaret Peggy Eaton had actually dated her future husband, John Eaton, while she was still married. Remember Rachel Robards Donaldson did that, right? So, Margaret Peggy Eaton, just like Rachel Jackson, had dated her future husband while he was still married. Now, the reason it became an issue is the wives of the other cabinet members would not socialize with the Eatons because of their scandalous behavior by dating while she was married. Okay? So the Battle of the Petticoats came from the fact that the wives of the other cabinet members would not socialize with the Eatons because of the fact that they dated while one of them was still married. Now the lady that pushed it the most, the lady that was the biggest instigator of this, was Vice President John C. Calhoun's wife. So the lady that really pushed this and made this a big deal and made it so the other cabinet members' wives would not socialize with the Eatons was Vice President John C. Calhoun's wife. She personally led this assault against the Eatons. How did Jackson feel about this? Was he a little sympathetic to the Eatons? Yes, he was, because that's what he and his wife did prior to their marriage. And so he basically told his cabinet members, you go home and tell your wives they will socialize with the Eatons. I don't care what their personal beliefs are. You boys go home and you tell your wives you will socialize with the Eatons. You will not exclude them any longer. So Jackson, sympathetic to the situation, told his cabinet members that their wives had to socialize with the Eatons. Well, generally, if you demand something upon somebody, what do? They bow up their neck and kind of go opposite. Well, that's what the wives did. Despite Jackson's demand, they refused to socialize with the Eatons. And this petticoat scandal, so to speak, or battle of the petticoats, lasted almost 2 years. They argued back and forth for 2 years, and finally Jackson couldn't take it anymore, so what did he do? Close. He asked his cabinet members to resign, which they all did. That sounds like a Donald Trump move to me, honestly. No, not being political, but could you see him doing that? I could. I could, without question. So, this thing went on, this battle of the petticoats went on for almost 2 years, and finally Jackson got so tired of it, he asked his cabinet members, all of them, to resign, and they did, over this. And that's a typical Andrew Jackson move. Okay? Any questions on the battle of the petticoats?
Did Johnny resign too?
No, he didn't have to.
Everybody else did.
Yeah, good question. No. But I'm not being political, but that is just something that Donald Trump would do. There's so many comparisons, I believe, politically between these two men. It's unreal. Okay? Now, that'll take us to our next subtopic, which is President Jackson's... Yes, dear?
You didn't say that Indian was settlement
What do you mean?
It's in the...
Oh, that shouldn't be on there. It's probably... Is it down farther? Yeah, I should just cross it off. I just didn't erase it when I made that. Thank you very much. Yeah. President Jackson's kitchen cabinet. Thank you, Julie. I just didn't get that erased. Now, I'm just going to start this by telling you a little bit about what we visited about. Did you know that during his presidency, Jackson went through many different cabinet members? He had 4 different Secretary of States and 5 different Secretary of the Treasuries during his presidency. That's a lot of changeover, right? And again, you can see some comparison between him and President Trump. So during his presidency, Jackson went through many cabinet members. He had 4 different Secretaries of State and 5 different Secretaries of the Treasury. That's going through them pretty quick, okay? Which tells you that he didn't spend a lot of time paying attention to his what? Regular cabinet, okay? So during his presidency, Jackson went through many different cabinet members. He had 4 different Secretary of State and 5 different Secretary of the Treasury. And he didn't take his advice much from his cabinet members, but from what they called his kitchen cabinet. So Jackson didn't take a lot of advice from his regular cabinet members. He took most of his advice from what we know as his kitchen cabinet. Does anybody want to guess what the kitchen cabinet might have been? it was a group of people. What did Jackson do? He appointed these cabinet members, right? But where was he really getting his advice from? People outside of the cabinet that he really trusted and listened to their opinions. Okay? So this kitchen cabinet were people that Jackson surrounded himself with that were unofficial advisors, but that he trusted immensely. So he didn't listen a lot to his regular cabinet. He listened a lot to what we know as his kitchen cabinet. Okay? And again, his kitchen cabinet were unofficial advisors that Jackson had great faith in and trusted. Why did they call him the kitchen cabinet? Anybody know? Yes?
Didn't they come through the kitchen door?
They did. They snuck into the White House through the back kitchen door so nobody saw him come in, and they would sit down and visit. Very good. Did you have a report on that, or how'd you know that? Oh, did I? Okay, well, now I'm going to listen. Anyway, they snuck in the back door of the kitchen and met with the president privately in the White House and gave him advice. So they called him the kitchen cabinet. Now, you know who a lot of members of his kitchen cabinet were? Because he was smart. He was a lot... Barack Obama had a great relationship with who? And Trump has a horrible relationship with who?
Oh, that one dude.
Well,
Joe Biden, right?
no, but no, a group of people in general.
No, whatever.
Who does Trump fight with all the time, every day?
Democrats.
Did you just say black?
Democrats.
Russia.
Who is he always complaining about every day?
Media. Oh, immigrants.
What group? False news. He says it 100 times a day.
Journalist?
The media. He has a horrible relationship with the media. Every day, I'll tell you what, my wife's up before me every day, and at 7 o'clock my alarm goes off, and here comes on, you know, Good Morning America, or whatever she's watching, and the first thing they ever say is something about President Trump and the media. Every single day. He had a horrible relationship with the media. Unlike Trump, Jackson knew the importance of the media, so many members of his kitchen cabinet were newspaper editors. Smart. And the reason he made well-known newspaper editors a member of his kitchen cabinet is he knew these editors would be impressed by that, and they would mold Jackson into a really good person in the press, which the media does the opposite for President Trump right now. So Jackson, that's really the big difference that I think President Trump and Andrew Jackson had, is Jackson understood the importance of having the media on your side. And he put newspaper editors in his kitchen cabinet and asked their advice, and even if he didn't take their advice, they thought they were pretty important. And how did they write about President Jackson in their papers? Favorably. Thought he was a wonderful person. John Kennedy was another master of the media. He was the first president to have live press conferences with the media on television, because television came out in its popularity in the 60s. One of the worst presidents in recent time with the media was Richard Nixon. He was horrible with the media. He hated the media, they hated him, and they destroyed him. And now we're back here. When you look, you know, you kind of look at people, great with the media, good, terrible, and whatever, not good, tremendous. Ronald Reagan was tremendous with the media. Bush, pretty good. Clinton, tremendous with the media. George W. Bush was good with the media, and he would say things that weren't kind of backwards. You know, he'd screw things up and kind of laugh at himself, and the media liked it. He was good with the media. Barack Obama, good with the media. This guy is really struggling with the media. And if you get the media not on your side, it's difficult to be in office. They will crush you. You can't go a day without turning the TV on hearing a criticism of the president. There were never criticisms from the media here, 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 or here, like you see today. There just were not. Okay, so the media was important. And Jackson was smart enough to figure out that I'll put newspaper editors in my kitchen cabinet, and even if I don't listen to them a lot, they're going to speak favorably of me, which they did. Okay, so that was a bright move. Okay, We'll move on to President Jackson's Indian policy. Now you kind of understand his philosophy of Indians, don't you? From what we've talked about, right? The Red Stick Wars and all that, okay? So President Jackson's now going to have some say in policy with Indians as President of the United States. And the thing you have to remember right off the bat, as his whole life, including the presidency, Jackson believed Indians were primitive people. That's how he viewed them, as primitive people. From the start, he viewed Native Americans or Indians as primitive people. Now, the country is different. We got the Mississippi River here, right? Where's all the action happening in the United States? East of the Mississippi or west? East, all east. And Jackson firmly believed, in his mind, right or wrong, that all of these Indians that lived east of the Mississippi River would be much happier if they were west of the Mississippi, where nobody would bother them. Because nobody at that time really cared about this land too much. So let's take these Indians who are primitive people and let's put them over here, because they'll be happier. That was kind of his thought. So Jackson strongly believed that Indian tribes that lived east of the Mississippi River would be much happier and better off if they were put in lands west of the Mississippi River. Now, what was the United States government disrupting for these Indian tribes east of the Mississippi? What were we disrupting all the time? And you will hear more about this when we get into Native Americans in the West. Their way of life. And Jackson, in his mind, good, bad, or otherwise, believed if we move these Indian tribes west of the Mississippi, they can go back to their way of life without our interference. They'll be much happier. So again, on these lands west of the Mississippi,